All right, welcome back. So last one we talked about, agents, and we got into tool calling. I merged a little bit of this current lesson into the last one because it just made more sense. We're gonna finish up the tool calling. We left off where we can pass the tool and the AI can tell us that it wants to call a tool, but we aren't actually doing anything with that. Yes.
How do you handle things like security when a user is using something that might be sent to an agent? How do you prevent them from accessing other users' data, these kinds of things?
It's a great question. The same way you do it now. The AI can't run anything you didn't give it access to. So, in that specific case of how would you prevent an AI from if you have like a multi-tenant system. Actually, we're gonna get into the very specifics of that literally right now, but it's really no different than what you're doing now, right? Like the function knows you can pass in different parameters to that function. Like this is the current user ID, and then that function can do a query scope down to just that user ID or whatever like you're fragmenting on, whatever, however however you split your users up. So the AI won't run any yeah, I guess you could just give your AI a tool that's like, here you go, here's my whole ORM, go crazy. Then yeah, I guess that's a problem, but you probably typically won't do that. You would have very scoped functions uh, within the realm of that tool call, so shouldn't be a problem. Cool. Okay, so we already talked about like what the tool calling stuff looks like, but I'm gonna show you kind of like the message flow. So here's a diagram. User asks a message, right? Assistant says, "Cool, I'll call that function." We didn't talk about arguments. We'll do arguments this time so you can see what that looks like. And then you immediately have to respond back. And we saw the error. You have to respond back with the role of tool, and the tool call ID must be the same ID that was in the tool calls array in the message before it. You have to do that. You will get the error that I had if you don't. Remember that. As far as I think this is confusing sometimes, is what can the tool return? Whatever you want. As long as it's a string, it doesn't matter. You can return whatever you want. There is no schema on what you return. The schema is mostly for what arguments are passed in, because that's something that your system needs to be deterministic so you can appropriately run the right function. But when you're giving something to the AI, it doesn't care. It doesn't need a schema. You just pass it whatever you want. So even getting creative in like what you return here can help the AI have better answers. Like some things I like to do is I like to if my tool is like some async function, I always try catch it so it doesn't throw an error. But if it does throw an error in the catch, I like to send back an object to the AI as a tool response of failed, true, reason, and then I'll put a reason so then the AI can see that reason, and then maybe it might show the user something like, oh, sorry, I think right now in our system, if an error happens, the AI we tell the AI an error happens versus just throwing an error and having the system shut down, and then we've trained the AI to be like, oh, sorry, I had a problem doing this. I let my engineers know, right? And it'll say something like that. So that way, you still have a good experience. Where if you just let that thing fail, user's not going to see anything. So it's a different way of programming. You kind of got to think about it. So you can return whatever you want as long as it's a string, which includes JSON. So uh, that's how that works. And then you feed that back to the AI, and the AI is like, okay, cool. I'm going to try to answer this now, or not, and I'm going to tell you to do another tool call. You don't know. That's the whole point of an agent. It decides on whether or not it can, should, or what it should call, and how it should call it. Does that make sense? Okay. We talked about this stuff already. Here's a really good example of some clear versus ambiguous matches. So I'll put this example here. So let's say a user asks for, what's the stock price of Apple? This is pretty clear because I have a function that calls get stock price, and it describes the stock price. This intent, that makes sense. And we even said that it takes an argument called symbol. They ask for Apple. That makes sense. I think the only thing that might be confusing here is that if the AI didn't know that Apple's ticker or symbol was AAPL, then maybe it'll just make something up, or maybe it'll ask. That is the only thing I can see where it would be confused. Everything else seems pretty clear here. The second one is pretty ambiguous. How's Apple doing today? I don't know. Should I be getting the stock price to figure that out? Maybe I have another tool that says search the web. Should I call that one instead? Maybe I have another tool that says something like it's very ambiguous on what the AI is supposed to do here. And this is, especially like in a chat interface where someone can type anything, this is where you run into problems where it's like, this is very ambiguous. So it's like best case scenario, it's a clear match or it's a no match. But a lot of the times it's this, because a lot of users might have like compound sentences like, can you do this? And then can you do this? And then can you do this as well? And that's one message. And it's like, whoa, what do you want me to do here, right? So it can get pretty confusing, and here lies the confusion and stuff like that. So it's like you will also want to make sure the tools that you give your AI are so different from each other that when it decides which ones it wants to choose, it's very clear which ones should be chosen. If like you have something that says like get weather, and then you have another one that says like get weather for a city, and they do way two different things, like good luck. Like that's just too close. It's better off just to have one tool called get weather and make it take an optional argument for a city, and then that's better. So it'll always call that one tool or something like that. So yeah, it can get pretty crazy, pretty hairy really quickly. Common function types, data retrieval. So this is like call this function, go get something. So hit another API, hit a database, RAG, something like that. Go get me some data, bring it back, and then, in this case, like show it to me, answer a question, whatever. Actions, these are like more mutative things. Go do something for me. This is where AI gets scary, and it'll go do a thing for you. Go send this email for me. Go, I don't know, go buy this thing for me. Here's my credit card. Oh, something spooky like that. Like it could do that, and it will do that if you have an API. So I think that's where it just gets absolutely terrifying. And then like calculations, like, answer that, like you need to perform some analysis that requires a brain and then give me an answer. So like in this case, calculate my monthly mortgage payment. Assuming this AI had access to, I don't know, some bank statements that you had or whatever information. And, I'm sorry, in this case, it takes in a principal, a rate, and year. So if you gave it a principal or rate in some years, it could calculate your mortgage for you. So this will just be a function that you make that literally takes in these three things and returns back your mortgage with some simple calculation of that. So those are really the most three things. The number one thing for sure is going to be this. It's going to be data retrieval, 100%. That's going to be like more than half your tools. Maybe some of this. This is very powerful, and I think it requires human in the loop. I'll talk about human in the loop later. Probably almost never this, unless you're doing fintech. If you're doing fintech, this is probably all you're doing, but probably never this, and from my experience. We talked about this already, descriptions. Don't do unclear descriptions. Emails. What the hell does that mean? Like, I don't know. Emails. Like, you really have to like work with AI as if it's another human. Like, that's like the best thing that I can describe is like just talk to it the way that you would talk to a human, and that's a great starting point. You can optimize it after that, but talk to it like you would talk to a human because it was trained on all human context. So it makes sense. Just do that. So if you just told someone that like emails, how would they know that this function is meant to like send emails? Like, I don't know, does it get emails? Does it delete emails? What do you mean? So yeah, like imagine if you had an engineer on your team and they wrote a function in your app and the name of the function was emails. What the hell does that do? I don't know. Give it a better name, right? So it's the same thing. And yeah, you can pretty much do anything. API calls, database ops, literally anything you want to do, you can do it. We talked about this. You need to, as far as like sending the message back, you need to reply back with a role of tool, a string with the answer, and the tool call ID must be the same ID as the tool call before it. So let's do it. So now we're going to create we're going to create a system that can handle figuring out. It's going to take the tool that the LLM told us to run. It's going to try to run the tool, get the answer for it, feed it back to the LLM, and then hopefully get an answer. We'll see what happens. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a tool runner. So if we go into source, I'm going to create a new file, call it tool runner.ts. Oh, I'm sorry, we already have it. It's just empty. There we go. And this is where we're actually going to create the function getWeather. We created the definition for the tool, but we didn't actually create the function that actually gets anything yet. So let's do that. So I'm going to just import this type of OpenAI from OpenAI. And then I'm just going to make a function that says const getWeather. Doesn't do anything right now. I'm just going to hard code a value. I looked, there were no good open open weather APIs that didn't require auth, and I was like, screw it. Like, we're just gonna fake it because there aren't. Trust me, I tried. There just were not any good ones that were meaningful. So we're just gonna say it's it's hot, 90 degrees. Put whatever you want. Put whatever weather you want. So the way the run tool works is it's going to take the tool call message, and then it's going to take the original user message. And then it's essentially just going to switch over the name of that function and match it with a function that we have. And that's really it. And then it'll throw an error if for some reason the AI decided to call a tool or a function that we didn't tell it about. Like, where are you getting this from? I didn't say that. So that's where that comes from. Or maybe you don't want to throw this error, and instead you have a function here that when called will return a message back to the AI like, stop calling this function, it doesn't exist. So then you don't, that way you don't break the AI, you tell it, stop calling this function, and that will live in the chat history going forward, so it probably won't call that function anymore. So it's a different way of thinking, different way of programming. So let's do that. We're gonna run the tool, it's gonna be async, because these tools are gonna be async eventually. And it's going to take the tool call, which is that type, and then the user message, which is just going to be a string, like that. Then I'm just going to make the input that I'm going to pass to every single function. It's going to have the original user message and then the tool args. And they always come in as JSON, so you want to parse them. Assuming that they're there, so I'm just going to just safely put an empty object here because I don't want that to break. So we have that. And then we just want to do our switch statement on toolCallFunction.name. So switch on toolCall.function.name. If the case is the exact same name as the tool that we created, in this case, we called it, I'm gonna change mine back to getWeather. We called it getWeather. So if the tool call is that name, I just want to return the getWeather function with this input. That's it. And this is where, to go back to the question we had earlier, is like, how do I make sure it only runs things that I want and has the right arguments? You can pass them in here. So when you run a tool, I'm passing in the tool call, and I'm passing in the user message. There's nothing stopping me from like, here's the current signed in user's ID. I can pass that in too inside of our agent, and then you can pass that down into here. Now you have the user ID. So whatever function you need to run here that needs access to the user ID, you can run it here. You can literally pass whatever you want. So this is what I do in production right now. Works fine. Works great. Okay. So we got that. The next thing we want to do, I think we already kind of did it. Yeah, we already did this. So having the tools here, passing them in, everything works great. I think we already did that, so we're fine. We need to just go adjust our agent. So we need to, right now, we have an if statement where we're just logging it. Now what we need to do is we need to call the actual function, run the function, get the result, save it in the database. We're going to save it right now. And we'll make a special function that saves the tool response for us right now. And then we'll just say that, like, cool, we called it. We'll get the result. And then we'll stop. Because after this, we need to loop. And that's the next step. That's a little more complicated to think about. So let's go do that. We'll go into our agent. Here is our loop. So instead of saying, logging it, what we can do, and here's something that's really cool, at least with OpenAI, is that it's either going to be content or it's either going to be tool calls. It won't be both. If you get a content back, that means the AI is ready to answer. It has a final answer. It's done. The loop is done. I have a final answer. If you get back tool calls, it's still thinking. It's like, run this for me. Right? So that's what I check. There is another property that I think OpenAI recommends you check, and it's like stop reason, I think. It's like, oh, what's the stop reason? Oh, I stopped because I called a function or something. I don't look at that. I just look at content or tool call. It's one of those two. So that's just what I do. You can also look at refusal, but so we can say if there's tool calls, if it is there, it's always going to be an array, even if you have parallel off. So what we want to do then in this case is I always just like to, if this was a parallel tool call, we would then loop over this array and do all of this for each one of them in like a promise.all, but we don't have parallel. So I'm just going to just do this. So I'll just say, tool call is that, and then I want to get the response. And I'm going to call my run tool function like that. It takes in the tool call, and it takes in the user message like that. And then once we, let me update our loader, our little spinner, so it knows what it's doing. So before I execute it, I'll say executing this thing, so we can see that status. We'll call it, and then what we want to do there is save that in our database. So I made a special method called save tool response that literally just calls add messages, but with like the role of tool, and then make sure it puts the right ID in the right place. So that way you don't have to do it every time. It's kind of annoying. So let's just swing over to memory and do that right quick. And we'll say export const save tool response. And this is going to take in the tool response, which is going to be a string, and then the tool call, what did I call it here? Oh yeah, tool call ID and tool response. I'll do the same order so it's not confusing. So tool call ID is a string, and then tool response is a string. Whoa. That's not what I want you to do. And I'm just going to return add messages like that. So add messages, this is going to be an object. The role has to be tool. Role tool is your answer to a tool call. Remember that. Role tool is your answer to the tool call. This is how the AI says, hey, run this function. You run the function. You get the answer. You save another message called role tool with the result of that and the ID of the tool that the agent told you to call, and you send it back. That's it. That's all this is for. I think it used to be function at some point. It's tool now. Okay. So now that we have that, oh wow, that thing just completed. I just wanted to go to the next line. It's auto-completed it so fast. So save tool response. Like that. We're going to pass in the tool call ID, which will be tool call dot ID, and then the tool response is just going to be tool response. Wait, did I pass in the entire response here? No, we just want to get the oh, come back. So we just want to put the result of that here. So the response would be, oh yeah, it's whatever this returns. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So taking the original ID of the tool call that we found from the output of the agent, and then passing in the result we got back from running that tool. Now I can update my loader, and I can say, cool, I'll say done, or I think there's like a stop method that I have. Or update it, sure. Okay, so done with that, and then for now, we'll just stop and we'll just return. We won't do anything else. But now, let's see here. We're adding this user message. We still want to add this message. Well, now we have to move this up. So if we add this message and after this, it's going to be added after we added the response to it. So this has to be added before. So we got to move this up to like here now. Because this is the actual tool. This is the agent saying, hey, I just responded back to you. So if this is a tool call, then now we get to return or save back the response to that tool. If it was the other way around, it would put a response before the tool call was actually saved. So next time we run this, it'll see that in the history and be like, what the hell? You just tried to respond to a tool that I didn't even tell you to do yet. Why'd you do that? So order matters. So we'll do that. And yeah, I think I had that here. Yeah, I have it here. So any questions so far? Nope. Okay.
Makes good sense.
All right. Let me just. I guess I'll add back that that log message. Let's just add that back. I feel like I'm logging somewhere else. I don't know where it is, but it's like really annoying. I don't know where it is. Is it in here? Oh, it's this thing. Get out of here. Okay. Cool. Okay. So now we have that. We're passing it a tool. We call it the weather tool. Got our descriptions. Got some reasoning here. It's looking really good. Let's run it and see where we broke. Let me clear my history. And let's try to see what happens here. Oh wow, look at that. I said, how is the weather? It said, can you specify the location for which you would like to know the weather? Interesting. Why did it do that?
Because it knows it needs a parameter for the weather.
Does it? Let's see. Get weather. Let's see. Get weather, and then get weather. Use it to. I don't have anything here for that. Let's see. Run agent tools. LLM tool calls. I don't know. I guess it just got ahead of itself and was like, give me a location. Let's see. Let's I don't know. Let's play along. Let's just say.
Just smart enough to know.
Right. I don't know.
Just gotta.
There it is. Yeah, I guess it was just like, yeah, I don't know. And this is what I'm talking about. So this is where then I would go in, and I would be like, usually get weather. Does not need a city or location, which to the AI probably doesn't make sense. It's like, then what am I getting the weather of if you don't need a city or location? But don't worry about it. That's what I told you to do.
I mean, if the context is like the system already has their let long or something, like.
Yep. Now you're thinking. So like in the system prompt, I could have been like, here's the current user's location, right? And now it just assumes that, which is exactly what it would do. So. But yeah, this is why you need evals, so you can like test stuff like that. But okay, cool. So we noticed that it ran it and then it stopped, which is exactly what we wanted. Okay, where am I at? There we go. And if we go back, we should end off on the tool response. There we go. So obviously it responds back with the hard-coded value that I had. It's hot, it's 90 degrees. The tool call ID matches this call ID. You don't, so in my system, we do something called human in the loop, and I know I said I'll come back and talk to that. But that's like when the function that needs to be called is not a function that's on your system, but it's a response that the user must give. They must say I approve or reject. So in that case, or actually beyond that, like we have to get an approval sometimes. So you have to like if you want to send an email, if you want to book a calendar event, we won't just run that tool for you. That tool is guarded by another tool called an approval tool. And the approval tool shows you what it's trying to do, and you have to say yes or no. And but the AI doesn't call the approval tool. We tell the AI that it called the approval tool. So we fake a tool call. So like I was telling you, the AI doesn't know who put these messages in this array. It doesn't know that it responded with this. It's just there. So when it sees role assistant, it's like, oh, that's what I said. It doesn't know that it did it or not. So what we do when I see that like you're trying to call a book calendar tool, I don't write that to the database. Instead, I put in front of it an approval tool, and I have to make up my own ID. I have to do all this stuff. I have to put the arguments in there that I think you're trying to do, and then I show that to the user. And then only if that's approved do I then write back the original tool that it was trying to do. So it could get pretty complicated, but the flexibility of like you being able to put whatever the hell you want in this message is kind of cool. So remember that you're not limited by like, man, I wish we could just like, I wish the assistant would just say, you can just say it. You can say the assistant said this, the AI said this, and then it's gonna think it said that, and that's always there. So, yes, question.
How many tokens do you recommend sending it? Is it okay to send 10K as an initial system object?
That's a hard question to answer because I don't know what model you're using. I don't know your constraints on like your budget. I would say if you have 10,000 tokens for a system prompt, I'll say this. All the folks making foundational models are moving towards a world where you don't need RAG anymore. And the way that they are trying to do that is because they just want to increase the token limit. So in their world, you should be able to send as many tokens as you want, and it doesn't matter. Now, what you have to think about, if you put 10,000 tokens in the system prompt, every single time you run the LLM, you're going to get charged 10,000 tokens. Every single time. In addition to the messages that are also being appended to the array. So if that's not something you want to deal with, then don't do it. If you're okay with that and it's necessary, then fine. I don't really know what the use case would be. Like if you're putting like a whole PDF inside it or not, like, I don't know. It really depends. Yes.
If a response from a tool is saved in chat history, what would happen if a similar question was asked again? Can you ensure that the AI calls the tool again instead of getting it from the chat history?
That's a great question. So let's try it right now. I already asked it what the weather was. So if I ask it again what the weather was, what do you expect to happen? I guess it depends on how you ask, right? If I ask, what was the weather again? Let's see what happens. It did not call the tool. It was like, I already know the weather. And it's because how I asked, like, oh, yeah. But if I ask this way, like, tell me what the weather is right now, though. I think it might run the tool again. I could be wrong. Let me see. Yeah, now it ran the tool again. So it really just depends on like how you ask it, because it's human, you know. So you got to account for these things. I don't know. It's really hard to think about sometimes, but yeah. And then you can add instructions for this. I could go in here, and we'll get to system prompt, but like this is where I would put in the system prompt. Hey, prefer calling tools every single time because data might be stale, and I don't want you giving someone outdated information. Always recall the tool. Don't, you know, or you could just be really good and like after you respond back, you know, to the agent and you save this tool here, I don't know, maybe give the user a grace period of like, I'm gonna let them do 3 follow-ups or X amount of follow-ups. After that, I'm deleting this data out of the chat history. So that would force the AI to call the tool again. Or I'll delete it as soon as I save it. So if they do a follow-up, it'll just call it again, so it's never stale. So I'll only put it there so it can answer the question they just asked. But as soon as I get back, as soon as I save this, as soon as I get back this response, I'm deleting it out of the chat message because I don't want them to call this again. So like when you loop and you come back before you run, before you return back to the user, you could be like, now delete the tool call before this, so the AI has no history of ever calling it. But then you got to think about the user experience. How does that reflect in the chat app? What does that look like? So, yeah, it's kind of tough. Cool. Any other questions? No. Okay. Alrighty.
Somebody got an error. An assistant message with tool calls must be followed by tool messages responding with each tool call ID.
Yeah, that you got that error. This is the same error that I had earlier, which means you have a message like this. It's role assistant. It has a tool calls array. The very next message that you have absolutely has to be a role tool. I imagine you probably started running this example where you ended from the last example where we didn't answer the tool call, so your database is in a broken state. Just clear all your messages out of your array and try again. But that's the reason you're getting that error, is because this has to come after this. I would imagine what's happening is you're getting this, and then you're immediately trying to send this. So it's messed up. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Let's keep it moving. What do we have? I think we have like loops. Okay. Agent loops. We'll do this one and then we'll take a break. So, agent loops. Why do we need loops? We kind of talked about it a lot. What is the problem that we have now? So the problem that we have now, if I look at this, is you can see right here. I asked it, tell me what and I even spelled it wrong. Tell me what the weather is right now, though. And all it did was say, get the weather. Okay. Tell me what the weather is. It didn't tell me. It went and got it, but it didn't actually tell me. Because now we have to feed that answer back to the LLM so it can answer the original question, and then it can give me an answer. That's a loop. We need to be able to do that, because if we go look at my database right now, the last message that's in there is just saying, I went and got the weather, but what I would expect to see is a message that looks like this, that's role assistant and has content in it and tells me the current weather. That's what I would expect to see, but I don't see that right now, right? So I need to feed this answer back to the LLM. The same way we feed a user message to the LLM, I want to feed this message back to the LLM. So then it can be like, cool, I got the data now, I'm gonna answer the question now. So we need to do that. And that's what makes an agent an agent. And then from there, the agent decides on whether or not it should keep doing that, because if it wants to loop again, it'll just spit out another tool call. If it doesn't want to loop again, it'll just be like, I have a final answer. Here's some content. And that's what we check on. So, some multi-step things that you might see out there is like people searching for flights, checking hotel availability, comparing prices, making bookings, send confirmations. These are all like multi-step things. I talked a little bit about dependent actions and how in my system on our company we use like approval. So like if you want to do one thing, there has to be another action that happens before it. There are so many ways to do that. You can just try to train the model with the right descriptions of the right tools and hope it just gets it right. We tried that, it just didn't work well. You can do what we do is where we like interject and we intercept, like, oh, you try to call this tool? Psych, do this one first. And only if they say yes, then we'll let you do this one. So it's like it's deterministic in that way. There's other ways to do it as well. If you have like an intent classifier, you don't even let the AI decide anything tool related. You do it yourself. You run them in parallel. So there really is no wrong or right way to do it. You got to try and see what works for yourself. But yeah, you can have like dependent actions like, run this tool and then you have to run this tool. You can put that in your system prompt. You can put that in your descriptions for your tools. You can put that in everywhere you can think of to get it to play nicely. So this is a really good example. Verify funds before you make a payment. So like if I say, cool, can you pay my bill right quick? Go pay this bill. And it's like, yeah, it'd be really cool if it looked at my bank account first to make sure I have the money before I went to go pay the bill. That way I don't have to like get this error message. So like I might say in the system prompt, before you run the make payment tool, be sure to always run the verify fund tool first. You have to do this. And then in the verify fund description, I might say, use this tool as a pre-tool for this tool and this tool and this tool. And then in the make payment function description, I might say, never run this tool without calling verify funds first, right? I might do stuff like that. And then even as like another interception, in the tool call, in that if statement there where I'm checking for tool calls, if I see make payment, I for sure know that if the AI did its job and called verify funds first, that the verify funds message would have to be 2 messages before this one. The tool call for the verify funds would have to be 2 messages before this, because the message before this would have been a response to verify funds, and the message before that would have been the call to verify funds. So what I could do inside that loop is like, oh, if I see a tool call for make payment, look 2 messages up to see if there's a verify funds there. And if there isn't, the AI just messed up and tried to like make a payment without verifying the funds. So stop, add the verify funds message, and then continue, right? So it's like you have to do all these things to make sure it stays on track, and instructions alone just aren't good enough, in my opinion. So it's fun. This one's kind of cool, but at the end of the day, you just need to send back the tool response. And here's an example of like someone like searching for flights, right? So the user says, find cheap flights to NYC and book me a hotel. That right there, we're gonna run 2 actions, I already know. You asking to do 2 things. So the first thing it does is it searches for flights. We call the function, we get the results back, we're like, cool, here's all the flights. We send that back to the AI, it's looping. The AI decides, cool, I'm now gonna search for hotels. It tells us, I wanna search for hotels with these arguments. Cool, we see that it wants to search for hotels, we call that function, we get back all the hotels. We send that back to the AI. Great, the AI gets that, and then it's like, cool, I have everything I need, I'm gonna answer this question now. And now you get back an answer of everything that it did. It did all those things. So, pretty cool. This is actually a really, really good example if somebody wants to like build something. So how does that actually look? Well, at the end of the day, it's just like a while loop. I mean, it really depends on your architecture, but for now, we're just gonna do a while loop. You could have a stop case in here. I think in this case, they have like, they have me. In this case, I have an example of, this is more like a one-off thing, not something you'll probably do in a chat, where it's like, the whole point of this agent is to do a thing, and I know it's supposed to do this thing, so I'm just gonna keep looping until that thing is done. But in a chat, you don't know if anybody's trying to do a thing. They can say whatever the hell they want, so you don't actually know what the goal is. So you can't actually hard code for a specific whether or not this task was complete. This would be like if there's a button in your app, and when you press this button, it's supposed to go do this thing. Then now I know what that thing is, so I could actually stop this loop when that thing is done, or not. In our case, it's a chat. We'll just keep looping forever until the AI says I'm done, essentially. We could stop it with like a max loops and be like, pass in 10 turns here. If it goes over 10 turns, break, stop. And that's something you can do, but then you end up in a potential broken state. If you broke on a tool call, remember the next message you send has to be a tool response, so then you have to fix that. So it's like you could break it, but like you have to break softly to like always break on a response from the AI whose role as assistant and content is filled out. Otherwise, it's gonna be broken. There's so many things to think about, but the flexibility is there. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's do it. Yeah, I talked a little bit about that, but this is really advanced. User canceled. Okay, let's talk about this one. So, there is a way that you can like, and here I talk about these things, right? So task complete, max turns reached. Obviously the thing blew up, user canceled. This is a fourth one, is if your system supports it, you could just have the user say like, oh, never mind, stop doing this. Don't even do it anymore, right? But like you would need the system that can support that. You probably need like WebSockets and things like that. And you would need some way of like feeding that input into a system that's actively running. So again, you would need like WebSocket. I don't think you could do this on serverless. You'd need like WebSockets for this and a persistent server that's like, cool, I'm going to start a job. I'm going to run this agent. In the same process, there's a WebSocket listening for a user who might say, please stop doing this. And if that's the case, I need to stop this loop, but safely and softly to the point where the last message is something that's not going to end off in a broken state. So pretty much the last message has to be role assistant and content has to be there. So typically what we do in our system when we're interrupted either by an error or something like that, I always check to be like, cool, what is the last message that we're on right now? If that's not safe, I then generate a safe message that says like, oops, sorry, like, looks like I got interrupted, or oops, sorry, there was an error. So I always end off on a soft message no matter what, so the next message the user sends won't break the system. Or you could catch it on when the user sends it, but then the user experience is bad. So you could do that. There really isn't anything you can't do. It's just a different way of thinking about it. Like I always just try to think about it as like if there's a human, like you ask, someone on your team to go do something and they're like just thinking about it, they're researching, they're churning on it, and then you Slack them like, stop doing that, I don't need that anymore, thank you. And they stop, what would they do with their work at that point? Like would they like just leave it there and be like, oh cool, here's everything I've done so far? Would they not show you? Like, and that's where you got to start thinking about like, what is your user experience? Where do you just like, cool, just get rid of all that work. I don't even want to know about that. Or like, actually, yeah, show me where you left off. So then now they have to like format it and make sure it's like, it ends like that. There's a last message like, oh yeah, I would have gotten done, but here's everything I have so far. And that's their final message. It's kind of like that. You really got to think about it from like a psychological standpoint of like, what would this be like if I were to talk to a human? Because that's really how you have to like program with these LLMs, in my opinion. It's like, from a psychology standpoint, how would a human have done this? And those are typically the patterns that I implement. I'm like, oh, this is how I would talk to a person, so I'm gonna implement that pattern here in the code. And it works very well with LLMs. All right, so let's make our loop. So it's not gonna be too crazy here. We don't really have to do too much here. We just need to add a while loop that is going to break your computer because it doesn't stop. And then the only time we do stop is here, right? We stop here when we see that there's response.content, as in the AI is done. It only responds with content when it's done. This is the terminal message. I am done. I'm ready to give an answer. There's nothing else coming after this. So we can just stop the loop right here. Otherwise, you're in a tool call and you're continuing to go. There's no third branch here. It's either content or it's tool calls. There's nothing else. So we can safely assume that. It will never do anything else. So let's do that. So let's go back into our agent. And here we go. We have this. So what we need to do is we're going to wrap pretty much. And the other thing we got to do is we got to move where we get the history, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So right now we get the history outside of here. We're going to have to move all of this inside of a loop because we're going to be saving to history and stuff down here, and also right here. We want to make sure when it comes back around that it has the new messages that were just generated. Otherwise, it won't have those messages. So we have to save it and then get it. We have to get the new history at the top of the loop and save the new messages at the bottom of the loop. So when it comes back, it has the new messages that were saved right before it. Otherwise, you have to keep track of that in memory and then save them all at once. Yeah.
Did you cut a step 5?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm flying.
That's right.
Let me do that. Cool. I will cut a step 5 right quick.
I think I've actually seen it in cases with using OpenAI stuff where it'll send you a content message back before it runs some tools, and then we'll like think about some stuff and then send you another content back.
Yeah, typically that's a good and I think we just saw an example of that. So like for instance, when I asked for the weather, it was like, what city? That's a content message. So In that case, it's like, yeah, I don't want to run a tool right now, but I might be thinking about it.
Well, like the use case for me is like, asking it for recommendations about something. The thing I've been doing, and it's like, I'll ask for the recommendations. It'll send a message back that's like, "Oh, cool. Let me look. Let me research that." And then it'll call a tool or do a RAG thing, and then it'll come back with the actual answer. But it'll say like, "Hey, let me look that up for you."
I wonder what's that property I talk about that I don't use? I wonder what the
final result is in or whatever.
Yeah, I wonder what it would say in that example, because it's like, oh, I have a content thing, but I'm not done yet, and I expect you to loop again so I could continue. Like, I wonder what that would be. Huh. That's interesting. I haven't ran into that, but that sounds terrifying. I need to make sure that doesn't happen on my system, because if it does, it's going to break entirely. So that would be terrible. Okay. So while true, I know. Everything in your body is telling you not to put that in here, but trust me, it's going to be fine. While true, we're going to just move everything over. Oops, one more. Let's do that. There we go. So while true, I want to get the history, get the response, save the response in the database, execute the tool, save the tool. This will just keep looping, but what we want to do is if response.content, we want to stop it, and then we just want to return here because we're done. There's nothing else to do. Any questions on this? Let me go back to my notes to make sure I'm being consistent. Yeah, I guess I don't need those logs at the bottom anymore. There we go. So again, we get the history, we run it through the LLM comes back, we save it in a database immediately. If the LLM says, I got some content for you, we just stop. We're like, cool, done. Yes?
I don't know if this person's talking to you or talking to the other guy in chat.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. It looks like he was just talking to the other guy in chat. Sorry.
Okay. So if the LLM comes back with content, we stop. We're done. If the LLM comes back with a tool call, we run that tool. We save in the database, and then it loops again. And then it comes back up here. It gets the history. The last thing that's in the database now is the response to that tool. So we run it back through. It's like, cool, got the answer now. Here's my response. You know what? I'm still not done. Run this other tool. Cool, run this other tool. Save the answer in the database. Loops back up. Gets all the messages again, which now is another answer to the last tool we ran. Go back to the AI. It responds back, cool, I'm ready to answer. Got it, we got your answer, stop. That's the loop. Let's see what we broke. So I'm going to just say, actually let me get rid of all this stuff. All right, and then let's just start with like hi to make sure we didn't break anything. Cool, that works. I'm just not logging anything. So let me make sure I log the thing that I need to log, and that would be log message response. I'll do that here. So it says hi. I'll say my name is Scott. Cool, nice to meet you, Scott, whatever. Okay, now I'm gonna say, what is the weather? Gonna try this. Oh, of course, it wants the city again because it's so smart. Yeah, in Mexico City. Cool, It went and tried to get the weather. It says it's hot, temperature. So now it answered it for us. Before we didn't get that. Before it was just like, all right, it ran the tool and that was it. Now we came back and fed it back to the assistant. It's just like, cool, now I have the answer. Here you go.
I think it just made that up though. Are we not logging the tool call anymore? Because aren't we answering 98 degrees?
I saw that it had the tool call. I saw it call it. I don't know where it went away, but let me put another log in here. I saw that it did it. Let's just log this in here. Log message. Response. Let's do that. Let me clear this again. And this is what I was saying to my earlier point. Even though it might have the data, it still might hallucinate. Cool. Let's try that again. Hi. Yep. What is the weather in Mexico City? There you go. It got the weather. And then, yeah, it's at 90 degrees. Maybe we did put 90. I thought we did put 98, though.
I thought it was 90.
Oh, it is 90. Yeah, we put 90. We put 90. We put 90. So it's right. It's just. But I do remember putting 98 at some point. I mean, I don't know when I changed it. Yeah.
Crazy for this reason.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, totally did the thing. And now we have a functional agent that doesn't do anything but tell you it's 90 degrees all the time. So like we actually need to like have it do some cool stuff, right? So before we move on to that, any questions about the loop, how we stop, when do we know, limits, all that jazz. So if you're thinking about like, but how would I put this on an API route? The same way you have it now, no difference. You would put it on an API route. Obviously, you have different constraints about like, if you're on serverless, like I talked about this earlier, execution time, how long the function is on, yada, yada, yada. If you're on a traditional server, you don't have this problem. You can do background jobs. There's so many things you can do. For us, we actually, I don't even know where to begin to describe how we do this, but basically every turn is its own job that can be replayed if failed. So at any point, if one of these turns fail, we just replay it from that position. And then we lock this process for a user. That way they can't submit another one. So like if we're already processing a job for them, as in they were on their iPhone and they submitted a message, and then they had another iPhone, they tried to submit another message before this one got back, we stopped that from happening. And then we broadcast the messages using WebSockets. Every time a new message comes back, we send that to their clients. So every time a message, you just see it pop up on your phone versus waiting till they're all done. So that's kind of how we do it. It works pretty good for now. But there's other ways. There's true streaming where you stream token by token, which is, that's what you would see on any chat app right now, Claude, ChatGPT. They stream the tokens as they come in. I decided not to have that approach because I feel like that's not human. Humans don't type that fast. They don't do that. If I'm chatting with a human, I see a typing indicator and then a message pops up, and that feels more human to me than like watching token stream in. So we decided not to go that approach. We also use structured outputs, so streaming JSON is useless. You can't do anything with it until it's done anyway. So doesn't really help us out. Any questions on this? Back in the day, the only way people did this was with LangChain. And then now you can see why I said you don't need LangChain. It's just a loop. Yeah, question.
How do you debug this loop? Do UIs like Langsmith have relevance in practice?
Langsmith is not, in my opinion, a tool like Langsmith is not for like debugging this. It's for improving the output of this, which is way different than like finding bugs in here. So if you're trying to figure out like how to make the output of this system better, as in like tool selection, quality of answers, things like that, yeah, something like Langsmith or any eval tool is going to help you do it. If you want to like be able to trace how long it takes for you to get a response back and how many tokens you're using, tools like Langsmith and other tools are going to help you do it. If you're just trying to figure out why your code ain't working, there's no help. You got to help yourself. Whatever debugging tools you use in Node applies here as well. Because at the end of the day, this is just an API call. What I like to do is, because if you think about it, everything is driven by this state. It's driven by this state, right? The AI is just driven by this state. So you can put the AI in whatever state you want by coming up with messages. So I have different scenarios that I have. Like I have literally a folder of all these different message scenarios that I can put through the AI to see what it would happen. I'm like, what if a user did this and then did this? Or what if the system was in this state, how would it respond? And I would run through those states, and then I would write the code to handle those states. And that's typically what I do. And then the next level above that is actually writing evals, which is very similar, but it's testing the quality of the output and the accuracy, and less about whether or not your code's gonna break. So those are the two ways that I handle it, and it pretty much covers everything for me. Cool. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Let me see which one's next to see. Oh yeah, we're gonna do some real tools. Okay, so let's take a break. Let's come back.
I was gonna say we're at an hour, so let's take a 10-minute.
Yep, let's take a 10-minute. We'll come back and we'll actually write some real tools. Get this thing popping. Yeah.